Tim, thank you so much for being with us today. For those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm probably I consider myself to be somebody who has some technical knowledge in the area of your self-protection. I see myself as more of a technician, and you decide whether or not the information is useful to you. I am a master close combat instructor. I've been doing it for over 30 years. I've trained people in over 52 countries, a lot of very well-known military units, law enforcement units. I focus these days, about 30% of my business is in that arena. And now what I'm really kind of focusing on is people just like your audience, and helping them, giving them the best information on how to minimize the chance that violence ever comes in their life. So that's a thumbnail sketch of who I am.
And you're being very modest. You've accomplished a lot in your life and your career, and I appreciate you for all that you're doing and all that you're doing to help other people. Because I know after your career in the military, you could have just retired and sat back in a big chair, and that would have been completely fine. But you decided that you wanted to keep helping people, and I think that is commendable.
Oh, thank you.
So you are an author of several books. My favorite one that you have written is called When Violence is the Answer. Great title. And I can say honestly, and I'm happy to be able to say this to you in person, you have written the best opening line in a nonfiction book that I have ever read. And I'm going to read that line for everybody here, and then I'm going to ask you what it means. So the opening line is, violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. Tell us what that means.
That is probably the summation of the whole book. It's a quote that I've been known for decades now. And it was really the theme. You talk about publishing. I've had a really mixed bag with publishing. They've ultimately been great, but people are very uncomfortable with this subject. And especially even fighting to get violence into the title was really tough. But violence, the reason I use violence is because violence is a very specific term, meaning if we use the term fight, which people are more comfortable with, it's really imprecise because, fight is very all over the place, meaning, you and I can have a fight, I can fight with my wife, I can fight with my kids, I can fight with my coworkers. It doesn't mean violence all the time. And it doesn't. When you say violence, everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about, crossing into that physical plane, grievous bodily harm. And the reason I say that, the reason I use that specific quote to open things up is because the first part of the subject, the first part of that quote, everybody loves, violence is rarely the answer. It's the second part that the book's all about. And it's the one where I find like there's the least amount of good knowledge, that unfortunately that when violence is the answer, it's the only answer. And so how do you navigate that? And my goal with any client is not to turn them into, I spent years in training in the spec ops community, private military contractor world, dealing with a bunch of alphas, and it was fun. And all we trained was really the tactics, the hand-to-hand combat, the transition between, brain and body to tools, things like knives and guns and how you do all the transitions and all the cool military type stuff that you see and law enforcement type stuff that you see that most people equate with, that training. Those are just tactics, the punching, the kicking and all of that are just tactics. And it really makes up 10% of, how you deal in the world of violence, and that's what I want to get across in the book. The idea is that probably the greatest weapon that you can have in if you really want to become, if you really want to master the subject of self-protection, you have to understand human nature, and you have to understand how people respond to things. And I found that my training in human nature has actually surpassed any of my physical training that I've done over the years as far as keeping me safe and keeping my family and my friends safe. And so that was the goal of the book. And also though, just so your audience understands, when violence is the answer, you need really specific information. It's really interesting when I in those military and law enforcement world, you would think they're really dialed in, at that point. They have force continuums or they have rules of engagement. What's really interesting is at the lower levels of both the force continuum or the rules of engagement, there's lots of information. There's lots of information on how you deploy tools, what you do, how you counter this, counter that. But when it gets to that highest level of whatever it is in your force continuum or your rules of engagement, where the operator is facing grievous bodily harm, meaning imminent grievous bodily harm, if they do not take action, they're going to be basically participating in their own murder. And what was really interesting is at that level, and these are highly, highly trained groups, like I was shocked, basically they say, hey, if it gets to that level, just do whatever it takes.
Right.
Dot. No information at all.
Right. Yeah. You just kind of make it up as you go. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So listen, the book itself and my approach to the subject, I'm going to talk very calmly to you, very straightforward to you. But if you need specific information on how to protect yourself from grievous bodily harm, I'm going to show you how to destroy a structure or a sensory system of the human body on that other threat or threats in order to save your own life. And you need very specific information on where on the human body to put your efforts. And so it's a juxtaposition, meaning I've found that if I only talk about when violence isn't the answer, where there's a lot of information out there on that, you'll kind of let it go right over your head. You go, yeah. You'll nod. I find it much better for me to take you into the physical world of when you ignore all this stuff and now you're facing grievous bodily harm, here's what you got to do to save your own life. And when people see what they have to do to another human to be able to protect themselves, it just changes them, and my goal in a book like that, or in any of my products or trainings or stuff, is to change your mindset, to change your behavior, because so many people are out there, great people, like, the people that listen to your podcast, and they're taking unnecessary chances, and they don't necessarily know that because they're getting away with it. And they don't realize there are unnecessary risks that we take. So what I like to do is show, hey, I know you've been going to the ATM at 10:30 at night. That's great. Here's a couple that did the same thing. Look what happened. A horrible assault happened. Everybody looks at it. And what's interesting is they all start looking at it from the tactical standpoint. They go, well, the man should have been facing towards the parking lot while his wife was getting the money out from the ATM. They don't look at the time code. The time code is 10:30 at night. And how many times, and this was an elderly couple, the video that I use is an elderly couple. And how many times do you think they've done that? How many times do you think they've gone successfully late at night that was not the first time they've gone to the ATM at that time of night, and yet the train didn't come. I call it, there are incidences like that where people are sleeping with their head on the railroad track. And because the train didn't come last night, they think it's fine. So they keep putting their head on the track. And so my job is to point out, hey, if you just take your head off of the track, we don't have to worry about that train ever coming. So that's kind of in a nutshell, what my goal is in self-protection training for people.
Right. And I really like your analogy of sleeping with your head on the railroad track. Obviously, we all know that's not something to do, but just because we haven't had a problem there before doesn't mean we should just keep going back there. That's a great analogy. Before, I read your book, I had done some self-defense training, and I always kind of thought that, violence was violence, and how it escalated and how it went was kind of based on the two individuals who were there. But then as I started reading, you really break down the difference between social aggression and asocial violence. Can you kind of give us a recap of what that is?
Yeah. It really comes down to choice. If I had to put it in a simple term, it's choice. Do you have the choice to walk away? Do you have the choice to talk your way out of this? Do you have the choice to do anything other than participate in violence at that point? If that's the case, that's what we call antisocial aggression. Now, it can be incredibly unpleasant. You can have somebody being very abusive verbally to you. You can have people, your ego can really take a hit. I talk about, I think the best way for me to get it across to, especially, dads that are out there, I'm going to give you my dad's story.
Sure.
It's two things. And I think the stories will tell what I'm talking about. So the first one is the young guy, young Tim, come back from South America. We were doing operations down there. I was involved in if anybody watched Narcos on Netflix, when they were down the early days, I was involved on the military side, doing that in the intel. So here I am operating in these areas. We're going up against cartels. It's crazy. So my situational awareness down there was just spot on. My ability and how I communicated with people, very, very precise. I come home to San Diego and I drop all that. I think, everything's great. I'm driving my buddies. I got 2 weeks off. I'm driving my buddies. We're in a part of San Diego. If anybody knows San Diego, it's Midway and Rosecrans, always has traffic at a certain time of day. We're in that traffic. I'm in my Jeep, jaw jacking with my friends. Guy pulls up and we're merging. We're all merging. And I'm talking like in total California traffic, like inching, right. So there's nobody cutting anybody off.
Right.
Well, I was ahead of this one guy and I just kept going ahead. I really wasn't even thinking about it because I was talking to my friends. Apparently, this guy thought I had gone before him, and that it wasn't my turn to go. And we could tell as he's looking, he wasn't hitting his horn or anything, but he was making faces and he was really angry and he was gestating. And we were laughing about it. We thought it was pretty funny, And of course, What did I do? I'm 27, I'm full of myself. I start egging him on. I look at it, I catch his eye in the mirror, I start like blowing him some kisses and stuff like that. And this guy's, and my friends are dying, and because we're all, in the units that we're in, and we're very self-confident about things. So this guy spends the next 10 minutes inching around. He goes around another car, and he inches until he can get in front of me. And he gets in front of me and he hits his brakes and, comes in. And then, I see him and he's like, he's giving me the sign like, hey, I'm going to get out of the car. So I go, oh, great. So I'm laughing. I'm thinking, here I am, Mr. hand-to-hand combat and everything. I jump out of the car. Now, no weapons, nothing on me. I jump out of the car and I'm surrounded by cars. And so I'm basically got this, this alley that I'm in.
Right.
Out from the back, I hear one of my friends yell, gun. Right. I just, it hit me, and it hit me all at once, tactically, everything going, I am in a fatal funnel. I have screwed myself. There's the only one thing I can do is I can only go forward. And then I look and it's not a gun. It's a club. It was called the club back then. It was a steering lock.
Yeah. I remember that.
In the old days. Yeah, you can tell how old I am, right? And so this guy was holding it up like a club. And I looked back at my friend and I said an expletive to my friend because, it wasn't a gun. And then I looked at this. And for me, that was an easy problem. The way I navigate, for me, I knew what the guy was terrible. The way he was coming at me with it. It looked like a really bad movie, hit. So he's trying to come at me this way. I just went in. I was so mad. And I was so relieved it wasn't a gun. I just came right in. I used my training and it was perfect. I slammed the radial nerve on his arm. I grabbed his arm. The club goes flying. I hit him the side of the neck. I comb grab his hair. I slam him on the back of his car, and I'm just about to hit him at that point. And that's when I see her. No matter how many times I tell this, gets me, man. I got twin daughters. They're 8. This little girl was probably 4.
Ooh.
And she's looking up through the thing going, please don't hit daddy. Or don't hurt daddy, And I couldn't believe this idiot had his kid in the car. I didn't even know there was a kid in the car. And I just stopped, dropped him, just threw him, grabbed the thing, took his club, go get the, F out of here and just go, right? That was the last time I ever chose to use violence. That was it. 27 was the last, I can honestly say that's the last time I ever chose to use violence, meaning I had every ability. I egged that on. I caused that situation. If he had a gun, I would have been in a really bad situation.
Sure.
At that point. So that's number one. So that was an antisocial aggression situation where I chose to use violence, and it could have gone horribly wrong on both sides. Even me slamming that guy in the car, hitting it. There's unintended consequences when you put your hands on people. No matter what you think you want to do, you have no idea how this person is going to respond to the violence. Meaning their body might have issues that you don't know about, that, maybe a bad heart or something like that you could trigger, from your strikes, and then you can be facing manslaughter. So that's the first situation. Second situation, fast forward, about 15 years. I've got my son, I'm picking my son up at his mom's house in Del Mar, and it was going to be a great day. I was taking him down, and he was going to go with his uncle. His uncle has some really cool boats that he was going to go with. I was going to train my seminar at a San Diego seminar that day. And later that night, we were going to go out to dinner. So I picked him up. I gave him something that he held. He held a magazine in his hand. And I gave him this magazine, and we're driving away. Now, this guy, there's no traffic. This guy thinks that I cut him off, coming down. Like, he was barreling down the hill and just, and I was turning into my lane, not his lane, my lane. And he's just hitting the horn and, flipping me off and everything. I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So I just ignore it. But we're pulling up, and there's a stoplight, and we both stop. And this guy looks over to me. Now, my son's sitting right here. This guy's over here. He's got his window down. I got my windows down. And I was just about to say, hey, sorry about that. Just de-escalate.
Sure.
And he starts laying into me. Oh, look at you. He saw the tattoo on my arm. He's like, oh, you think you're tough? He's like, I'll kick your butt. Saying all this stuff in front of my son. And, I just said, hey, sorry, man. My fault. Didn't mean to do it. He just kind of looked at me. I wasn't feeding any of it. And so he just left.
Right.
And my son looks at me. My son was about 8 at the time. And my son looks at me. He goes, Dad, why didn't you just get out? He goes, you could have taken that guy. You could have hit him. And so it was a teachable moment. And I sat there and I said, hey, listen, you're absolutely right. I probably could. And you know what? I really wanted to. I go, he was really rude. And I said, he was being violent. You're in the car. I have to protect you. I said, but let's think it out. I go, what if I did? What if I got out of the car and he had a gun? What if I got out of the car and, he did something to you that I didn't know about? I said, or what if I was successful? What if I got him and I hit him? What if inadvertently he fell, I hit his head, maybe died? He goes, then I'm facing, I'm facing jail time. I'm not going to be around for a while. I go, there's all these things you got to think about before you ever use it. I go, I had choice, Connor. And I said, until I don't have choice, I'm not going to use violence. And he goes, yeah, but you're this guy. And he holds up the magazine I gave him because it was my first black belt cover that I had, and, in his little mind, it was that. But so the idea of choices in both those situations, I had choice. And the issue being what I see with most of us, especially dads, especially when you feel your family's being threatened, or there is, some sort of a discourteous approach, you have to really think it out. I understand the justified outrage a lot of people have, and they want to protect their family and kid, but your number one job is to, raise adults and raise responsible adults and get them in there. Most of what we get upset about, and I mean really upset about, doesn't pass what I call the 3-day test. And the 3-day test is, you have to ask yourself, this incident that I'm about to get myself involved in, you can't really do it in the heat of the moment. We need to do it when we're calm like this.
Sure.
Think about an incident or think about something in the past. And you go, I'm about to step over the line here and get physical. Am I okay 3 days from now sitting in a jail cell or 6 feet under? Would I tell myself there was no choice, there was nothing else I could have done? Very few things rise to that level, where you're devoid of choice. And really, when you understand that clarity, it's very easy to understand when you would ever respond with violence. I basically, to get it through to people, like anything I teach you physically to do, it's on the level, I put it on the level of having a handgun. And, the threat is such that you would feel justified emptying that handgun into the threat or threats. And if that is not the case, it is not the time to use violence.
I like that. And you bring to mind something that I've witnessed in people like yourself who teach defensive tactics. I know somebody who teaches defensive tactics here where I live, and he is one of the kindest people that I know, because I think when people like yourself understand violence and you understand the consequences and you have been through it, the less likely you are to escalate to the point that you need to actually use violence. And I sit there and I think the man who is quiet in an argument is probably the most dangerous man involved in that particular altercation. Is that been some of your experience?
Yeah, I've told people the people that are most comfortable and most adept at, using the tool of violence, and have had to do some horrific things. And, we're very successful in some very ugly areas of the world with some very ugly people, are usually the calmest, coolest people. Love them around my kids when you'd never know. They just don't, it's just not there. And there's a twofold reason for that. One is what you're talking about. It's just, there's no reason to go around and be aggressive. False aggression doesn't help you at all. If anything, it brings there. The other thing is too, it's tactical advantage. I don't want anybody to know anything. If sure. I can meet somebody and through my tattoos and my size and the fact that I like to work out, they come away with just saying, oh, he's kind of a lovable meathead, then I'm winning. That's exactly what I want them to think. I don't want them to feel anything, because if I need the tool, I want it to be a complete surprise. So there's two reasons to act that way. Surprise is a huge tactical advantage when it comes to violence, especially if they make assumptions about you. And, I love it when people just, when I meet new people, and at first they're a little tentative sometimes because they hear about me, and then they realize, I encourage conversation and joke around, and I've got, I got a good sense of humor, and I like people, I get along. But when I see a guy who I can tell is kind of like, he's trying to size up where I am on the totem pole. And as soon as he feels coming, and then he starts, maybe he says like a deferential remark to me, or he tries to, take me down a peg or something. In my mind, I sit there and go, oh, good, I got you. That's exactly what I want out of you. And so there's a twofold reason for being that way. There's no advantage to you, showing your cards at all, and the other thing too is, I tell people all the time, that's why I really don't sell any merchandise or shirts that basically kind of obviously say what we do, like it's in there, like, and the reason being is that's just a neon sign, right, to a predator, to somebody who just says, oh, really? Oh, you're that guy? Oh, okay. I'll just wait till you turn around. Right. And so you bring it on. Like, I never was one of those guys. And listen, guys are proud of their combat sports and everything. I totally get it. But I don't do any of that stuff. Just like we never had on our cars anything that identified what military units we were from, or any tattoos or anything like that would designate what you were. Because again, that's, just something that you want, to surprise. And that's where I see a lot of new guys. A lot of guys get to the point, especially if they have a young family, and they go, I've really never learned how to protect myself. So I'm going to go join my BJJ gym, or I'm going to do this. And it's great. And it's awesome. And especially, I will say, there's something about the Brazilian jiu-jitsu community. They have just a way of just, it also, as men, it's a great place to have a lot of friends. There's a real community in most BJJ groups. So I get that. And they become into it, but they wear everything all the time, advertising who and what they are. And they don't understand that there are some people out there that just don't play the game, and so again, it's a whole strategy that you want. Really what you want, the tactics I'll teach you to use your brain and body to protect yourself. But really what you want is, you want the overall strategy. How do you conduct your life? How do you create a life that minimizes the chance for violence entering your life and your family's life? And that is a much bigger perspective that you have to do. And it involves more things, there's a lot to the human nature side. There's a lot of really good materials and books that you should immerse yourself in to really learn those things, because you pick up on certain strategies that people use, and you can pick up on predator strategies very quickly. So that's it. But the idea, you get back the idea of what we call antisocial aggression and asocial violence. There's two things. Antisocial aggression always involves communication. It can be really unpleasant communication, but you're still having communication.
Right.
When that guy and I were going back and forth in the car, that was communication. When the guy, with my son, we were going back and forth, that was communication, meaning it hadn't, there were still opportunities there to disengage on either side. There's opportunities to pull away. The hallmark of asocial violence, and the reason it's called asocial, all that really means is, no communication.
Right.
It means the person has stopped communicating with you, and now you're facing imminent grievous bodily harm because they are going to use violence. And that's where, they're just usually the head is down, and they're coming at you. And that's it. And you can't talk your way out of it. And that's where a lot of people, I think the greatest gift that I give to people when they come train with me is we train in an asocial environment, meaning we do not talk. There's no music. We don't help each other up off the mat or any of that, because none of that's going to be out there for you, you know. And
true.
Clients of mine that have had, unfortunately, to use the information have always told me, thank God, I recognized asocial, you know, and they recognize where it is. And it's not something that you really intellectually learn. It's really a kinesthetic thing. It's really training in an environment where there's no normal human connection. And, you know, I go to my buddy's MMA gym and it's awesome. And it has an amazing workout facility. I go there and work out, and some of the top UFC guys are training there because I live in Las Vegas. And so I know a lot of the fighters and I get to see it. One of my favorite places to go. The music's incredible. You just want to work out when you're there. You just get to sit there and look in the octagon or one of the other training areas where you get two world-class guys training. You know, it's just really cool, you know, and it's great. And these guys are awesome. They're competing with each other. They're coming down. They're helping each other up. They're giving each other hugs. They're saying, hey, you did really good here. Boom. Well, my place used to be right across the street. I have a new place now, but my place used to be right across the street, in the same you know, commercial facility. And when you go to my place, like no music, no talking, all you do is the only sounds you hear are people hitting the mats, getting back up. Now that's not being hardcore, because, you know, we're also going at a much slower and more deliberate pace because we are learning where to go in the human body to, you know, do real damage. We're not trying to compete with somebody. We're trying to use the skill set of destruction, which is much simpler than the skill sets required for competition. And so people are sitting there going, you know, they're trying to put 1 square inch on a vulnerable square inch of their training partner, and they're really focused and they're just coming in. But there's no emotional payoff, you know, with violence. It's you use it because you have to.
Right.
But it's not a competition. It's not something where you feel good about it after. You feel like, hey, I was devoid of choice. I had to do this. I'm very glad I had this knowledge. But, you know, as I tell people all the time, if your listeners are trying to figure out, you know, what it is to, you know, if they haven't experienced real violence, the analogy I give to people in training all the time is I ask a class, I say, hey, listen, how many people in here know how to swim? Usually the vast majority of people in the seminar, their hands go up. Mm-hmm. And I go, okay, of all you guys that know how to swim, I said, how many of you have ever had to swim for your life? And there's usually 1 to 2. I always keep my hand up because I had to swim for my life twice. And, you know, we keep our hands up. And I said, okay, of all the people that had to swim for your life, would you ever want to experience that again? All the hands come down. And that's the difference. Meaning there are a lot of people that, you know, we all know how to swim. We had a fun time. You know, I swim in the pool. I go to the beach, probably thinking very positive things.
Sure.
But in that particular thing, when you had to swim for your life in a really dangerous waters at that point, you know, it's something that you're so glad you survived it, but man, you hope you go the rest of your life without ever having to experience it again.
Right.
And that's really what violence is. You know, it's that. So it's not something you ever want to seek. There's no nobility in it. People think there's, you know, this noble thing. Listen, if you protect yourself and your family, yes, that's great. But I guarantee you will not feel noble. You will just feel like, you know, thank God, you know, that I was able to protect myself, get us out of there. So again, I like to break through all of the myths that are out there, and all of the, especially also, you know, the media and Hollywood myth, you know, they mythically make violence seem like it's something it's not. You know, right. I always try to guide people towards, you know, there are some media shows that are pretty good at depicting real violence. You know, even in a show, and I usually turn people to those movies or those TV shows, and everybody kind of gets because they know it's hard to watch. You know, real violence is hard to watch when you're doing that. So again, a lot of it is just being sane and sober. Now, the good news for the people listening is the skill sets of destruction, what I'm talking about, is available to everybody. It has nothing to do with being bigger, faster, and stronger. As long as you can think and move, you can learn to use your body, your human machine, to break things on a predator because they don't fear you. The predator will make a mistake. I don't train you to compete with the predator. I don't train you to get in a ring with a predator and go. We probably know how most times that would turn out. What I am teaching you to do is basically they don't fear you. So they bring themselves close enough to where they have a vulnerable part of themselves that's exposed. And now you know what to do with that. You know how to successfully get an injury there. And if you do, when you hit these areas of the human body that we talk about, people know things like the eye and the throat and the groin or the knee or something like that. But, what we're looking at is we're hitting a part of the body that creates enough trauma that the brain is out of the equation as far as being the reacting to the trauma. And we've all experienced it. If you step on a sharp object, your foot comes screaming up. You don't sit there and, mentally go, oh, I just stepped on a nail, I better pull my foot up. It automatically happens. If we touch a hot surface, our hand comes off right away. Right. That is the afferent nervous system communicating with the body. And if the trauma spike is high enough, as that signal is going up the spine to the brain, another signal will be shot right back down to the affected area and say, move it now. And when you do that, no matter what the will is of the individual, the predator could be, just the most vicious person ever. They are a slave to their own body. They have to react to the trauma. And that's where you have your advantage. And so that's the whole idea of the system. I basically provide to you the Rosetta Stone for self-protection, where on the human body to put your efforts so that you can get a result, that you can bank on. And there's a training methodology to do that. But that is that, if I had to really narrow it down, that's that 20%, 10 to 20% of tactical information that you need. It's very important because if you are in that asocial situation, that black swan event, this is the information you need. You have to be able to do this to another person to be able to walk away. What's interesting though is once you train like that, that's where all the behavioral changes on everything else come out. Once you really understand violence and you understand how the human body responds to it. And again, I give you lots of objective video, and I don't want anybody to believe anything we say. I want them to sit there, and I would tell this to everybody. If a question is to people, hey, I want to train for criminal violence. The assumptions that I make when I go to train somebody, these are the assumptions that we assume. We assume it's going to be multiple attackers. We assume those attackers are going to be bigger, faster, and stronger, and that they're going to be armed. Okay, that's our baseline approach. So the question you have to ask yourself is, whatever the combat sport, martial art, or system is that you're training in, does it look like real violence? When you look at acts of real violence, and unfortunately or fortunately, in my case, I feel fortunate because it's useful with closed circuit TV cameras capturing all sorts of criminal activity and all sorts of criminal assaults. There's so many examples of real violence and what it really looks like and what people really respond to. And then sports injury is the other area that we focus on, because in sports injury, which is where we did a lot of our original research in the military, we use sports injury because those injuries occur from humans colliding with humans or humans colliding with the ground, the planet. Those are forces you and I can replicate. Oftentimes, I've seen some books in the past talking about injury, and they're showing pictures that they're trying to say, oh, well, if you kick a guy here, you get this result, and they're showing like a cracked femur, and it's from a car crash. It's from right. Things that you and I can't replicate. So you want to be very careful on where you get your knowledge. And the great thing about sports, the good thing about sports injury is there's lots of objective information. The other thing that you see in sports injury, which is really interesting, is you see the effect of the brain and what happens. These guys are so focused on what they're doing. They're elite athletes for the most part, because a lot of these are professional athletes that I have stuff from. They want to win. They've conditioned themselves. They're in amazing shape. Their whole world revolves around the ball or whatever they're doing at that point until the injury occurs. When the injury occurs, their whole persona is going to that affected area, no matter what they want to do. I've seen boxers that get hit in the liver, a liver punch, it's a body blow. And it's devastating. If it's ever, any of you that's ever experienced it, you'll know what I'm talking about, meaning it absolutely seizes your whole body. And no matter what you want to do, you don't do anything. You drop to your knees, your eyes are glassy, and you can't react to it. The pain is so intense that it just, it drops you. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about. And then when you look at real violence or real injuries and you say, okay, is what I'm training mimicking this? Is it teaching me to do this? And that's really how you decide what you want to train for. There is nothing wrong with wanting to train and compete in a combat sport.
Sure.
Nothing wrong at all. You just have to ask yourself, why are you training? And since this is called the Secure Dad podcast, I assume, most people living here, listening to this have kids,
right,
and have families. And, to me at this stage, I'm in my 50s now, but really I made the transition out of combat sports, competitive combat sports, really in my early 30s. And then I focused solely, my career and everything, we were focused on this anyways, but I really have focused on, what we're talking about right now, because of course, this is the threat that I really care about. Being able to submit somebody in a competition or being able to, beat somebody in a competition doesn't really have the effect that I want. The other thing that you just have to keep in mind is there's only one way you can have combat sports, and that's to make direct injury to the human body illegal. The last time that I looked at the UFC, it had 31 rules. 28 of those, 27 or 28 of those rules were outlawing direct injury to the human body, meaning you're
sure,
you couldn't do that. So if you want the cheat sheet on how to use violence, look at those injuries.
Sure.
Look at the things that they won't let you do. And that's how they're able to have this amazing tactical, game where you see these guys competing at the highest level, because, they're not trying to maim, cripple, and kill each other.
Right.
Yes. Do knockouts happen? Absolutely. Do unavoidable injuries happen? Yeah. Unintentional, but it's not deliberate. Whereas when you're out there, that's what these predators do. These predators go for direct injury, and they're trying to do that. And you want to be able to respond in kind, and so that's just it. If you've made that decision, it's hard to do both. It's hard to do competition and destruction. So you just have to ask yourself, what is it that's most important to you? And what do you want to have hop out of you when the situation dictates? That's the other thing too, is you will do what you train. You will not rise to the new level. You will drop to your level of training.
Right.
And I know a lot of people have heard that before, but, especially when it comes to violence, you will try to probably use a competition type of move on somebody who's just trying to kill you. And there's an example, a buddy of mine, an Australian commando, he had the first knife kill in Australian Special Forces, I think, since Vietnam, recently in not recently, but a couple of years ago in Afghanistan. And JJ talks about the idea that, he was really getting into jujitsu at the time and everything. And they went in this one place, and one of the jihadists came at him and was trying to get at him. He got him in basically a Kimura, which is like a double wrist lock. And he ended up snapping his arm. And they're this close to each other.
Sure.
And he ends up snapping his arm, and the guy doesn't stop. As a matter of fact, he's reaching, JJ can see that he's reaching down, trying to get a grenade that JJ bought. So JJ right there, his knife was right here, just took it, ends up killing the guy. And he realized, I was competing. I was using martial arts to try to submit this guy. All he wanted to do was kill me.
Right.
And it was just that, not that one is better than the other. So I try to get across. I love martial arts and I love combat sports. And I'm a huge practitioner. My kids are all doing it. I want them trained early on in those arts, so later on I can train them in the violence. There's so many positives to it. But again, when you're talking about fighting for your life, protecting your family, and doing things, you want a direct path to violence. You need that direct path, because that's what the predator is going to use on you. And you want to make sure that you get there first. You get that injury first. And that's key to people. So again, it's just a decision that you make. And normally it's when we have families, we start making these decisions. I know I feel way more vulnerable when I had kids than I ever did in my life. And you start changing things up.
Right. And you've talked a lot about the importance of making sure that you don't use violence unless you absolutely need it. And part of us is being my audience is protector parents. These are the people that understand they need to protect their family, and they're awesome people. And part of being a protector family is being able to see a situation and realize, okay, so somebody cut me off in traffic. I could be in a situation where I get out and there, things could go wrong. But part of being a parent is I have to make sure, like you said earlier, I'm not going to end up in jail. I'm not going to end up 6 feet, in the ground, or I'm not going to do something that I'm going to regret for the rest of my life. And I just drank my life away trying to deal with that particular moment. We have to be there for our kids when they're there to graduate high school and when they go to college and when they get married. We have a lifetime commitment to our family. So with that in mind, and you've talked a lot about de-escalation. What are your go-to ideas, and what are your go-to theories for de-escalation in public? What's something that we as protector parents could probably remember to say, hey, I don't want to get in this situation, buddy. Let's just move on.
I think a lot of it comes down to wanting people to conduct themselves in the way you think is proper. And when they don't do that, you feel you need to take action or you need to say something because it's upsetting to the people around you or something like that. And I'll give you an example. I did a YouTube video recently of a young hockey coach in Minnesota. And he was a girls hockey coach. And by all accounts, everybody just said, this guy's the greatest guy ever. He looked like a great guy and everything, but he was out at a kind of a bar restaurant and, during COVID, obviously. And he goes into the bathroom and the urinals are, every other urinal is covered in plastic, like a garbage bag, because for social distancing. So this coach is in there going to the bathroom and some guy comes in and he's just ranting and raving. He's drunk, obviously. Ranting and raving, he just rips, not even next to the guy, just rips one of the bags open and just uses the urinal that, is there for social distancing. And, he was acting like a total, idiot.
Right.
Coach doesn't say anything to him at that time. Okay. Doesn't say anything. Boom. Goes back to his seat, gets up there. He's getting up to go. At the same time, the other guy's leaving. The other guy's still being belligerent and doing something. Coach is talking to his friends. This guy's walking out and the coach just couldn't let it go. Says something to the guy. They're right outside the door of the bar restaurant, and they start, going back and forth. Boom. This guy ends up hitting the coach. I'm pretty sure he hit him, and the coach lost his balance, went back and fell down a staircase, and is dead.
Yeah, I remember that story.
And the other guy was in there. Now, the thing is, that was totally avoidable.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do, but listen, I get it. That people are going to just behave poorly. Marcus Aurelius had a thing where every day he goes, I expect today that people are going to lie to me. They're going to try to cheat me. They're going to be rude. He has a whole list of things. I'm paraphrasing it.
Sure.
But this was the Emperor of Rome. And he did that, in Stoic philosophy. And I try to remind myself of that every day. Before I go, I am no means perfect at this. There are times I had a woman almost try to run me off the road with my son in the car at one point, because again, she thought it was a merging issue and it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I got to tell you, man, it took every ounce for me to control myself. I literally, in my mind, I wanted to ram my car into her.
Sure.
And it just goes, it's a very human response. Don't get me wrong. It's not. Yeah. No matter how well trained you are, but in the moment I caught myself, and again, you got to realize, what do I want my kid to see? Do I want him to see, hey, this is the way to react to this kind of stuff, be violent, do these things. I mean, my uncles were really violent, growing up, and I saw a lot of violence when I was growing up. And, in some ways it was very useful to me, but I also realized that, you don't want to live like that. There's no reason. They participate in a lot of things that you could have just let go. Now, my adult self understands that. So again, we got a tremendous responsibility, but we are definitely we are hamstrung basically. We're not going into this fully available, because why? We've got a lot to lose.
Right.
The other guy doesn't.
Right.
Or the other guy, they don't care. And, I think the more you familiarize yourself with those types, like I go into the prisons, I talk to leaders of former leaders of the gangs and stuff. I just did an interview with Sammy the Bull Gravano, talking about, violence in the mob and how they do these criminal organizations and how they work and how they recruit. And, to dads with boys out there, all I can tell you is, if you're not going to be that figure in their life, they're going to find somebody. Right. And they may not find the right type of mentor. And there are some very charismatic predator mentors out there that'll be glad to pick your son up, and do that. So as dads, we've got to, we've really got to think about that. You got to have a strong presence, training your kid to be responsible, training them in self-protection. If you're comfortable with firearms, training them, to be responsible around firearms. All that stuff early on really helps. It helps, when I think the thing is, we try to shield our kids from too much. Right. And we understand why, but think about like, I know when I grew up, I would take off in the morning with a lunch bag on my back, my bike with my buddies on a Saturday. And my mom would just say, "Hey, come home when the street lights are on." And they had no idea where the hell we were. Now, listen, I'm not anticipating that. I'm just saying, think about all the freedom and all the things that we had to learn. And we learned, hey, there aren't nice people out there and stuff. And so I think sometimes with helicopter parenting, we have to balance it off, and we have to give them challenges and let them figure out stuff and let them know, my kids all know that, hey, in here, with your family and your extended family, you're loved. We care about you. You can misbehave. You can do stuff, and we will still work with you. I go, out there, I said, there are people that are just waiting for you to make a mistake. I said, it's not, and we won't know who they are. Right. I can't point them out, and so I inculcate that early on with my children, and, get them thinking that they know that, and I'm very fortunate that my wife is very much on board with everything that we do. It's hard when you have one spouse that's very uncomfortable with talking about these types of subjects or this type of training, because I think the big myth that's out there is people think if you train in violence, it makes you violent. And if anything, I can tell you, it's the exact opposite. It will make you will live. What's really interesting is the more comfortable you are with justified lethal force, the better your life is. You just, because you've already thought of the problem, you understand the ramifications, and you decide now, you go, hey, listen, okay, I've already taken care of this 800-pound gorilla in the room, and until I need this, I'm going to live a great life. I'm going to really enjoy myself because I've already planned for this. I've already thought about this. I've already, this part of me is there. It's the people that have never thought about it that just live with this abject fear. And, listen, life's not fair. And there are some just black swan events that are absolutely horrible that happen. And, there are some situations where, listen, there's nothing you could have done. But those are really rare. And the vast, vast majority of things that we'll face in our lives, if we're not leading a criminal lifestyle, there's very little chance that violence should enter our life if we take the proper precautions. Right. And it really doesn't take, you don't have to become a super ninja. You don't have to become a world-class shooter. You don't have to be, and that's the problem with like social media. We emphasize, and I think because there's so, especially young men have really no mentors out there. They don't have anything, and it's tough. We're being told that men are, that the masculinity is toxic and things like that. So guys are pretty beaten down. And I'm not trying to get political with it. I'm just saying what I'm noticing though is you see these influencers that come up. A lot of them are ex-special operations guys or MMA guys or something like that, and they're really, really popular. And I think it's because young men don't have anybody to follow. They don't have those things. I had that. I grew up on military bases. I had lots of great role models, including my dad, on that. I think they've gone away. But the problem is when you only look at the elite guys, you think that's what you have to do to be able to protect yourself. And that's just not the case. You can be really effective. You don't have to be, a world-class athlete. you can really get some good basic training and just apply yourself and still be really competent at taking care of yourself and your family.
Absolutely. So, Tim, as we wrap up here, I want to ask you, we've talked a lot about family, and I greatly appreciate that. You mentioned your twin daughters here a little while ago. For all the parents that are listening, what's one thing that you want them to know about protecting their family?
I think this is going to be a hard one for people to hear, but they've got to hear it.
Okay.
If you're going to teach your kids, if you're going to put them in self-defense or self-protection or anything like that at a young age, you're doing it because you want them to learn skill sets. You want them to learn discipline. You want them to, maybe stick it out in training like that. Really choose your instructor as an instructor that's really good for kids, but have no illusions. They can't compete with the predator mind. They can't compete with anybody. It's our job. And again, this is not to encourage helicopter parenting. It's just a reality. I mean,
right.
Young minds, no matter how well trained they are or anything like that, we are it. I wrote a blog post years ago called Does the lion cub fight the hyena? Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's the lioness that fights the hyenas. And that's what we're out there with, So the idea is, everything I'm doing with my children right now is to prepare them to be really good adults. When I put them out in the life and stuff, they're going to have the skill sets. But during the young years, you're there. And then, it's really just open communication with your kids, because the issue that we have, my wife, just people will probably know this, my wife's a deputy chief out here in Las Vegas. And so she's up and she runs a part where we were talking about, threats to children and how they get them, online, all of those things. Again, our strategy has to be everything. It has to be cybersecurity. It has to be all of that. But really, it comes down to communication. What do you know about kids? Engage your kids in conversation, even if it's really tough for you. They're find a way to talk to them, because I guarantee you, they're going to be approached by a friend or something where there's going to be a potentiality for, some sort of violence or some sort of, criminal activity. And it's just prevalent right now. And the people I see doing the best job are those that keep the communication lines open and really, really do it. And then again, also for us, we listen, we're the unpopular parents. My kids, if you're going to spend the night, you can spend the night at our house. Mm-hmm. We're going to do stuff like that. I'm sorry. There's just too many things that we've seen where we put our kids at risk when they're going out. You can still have really fun events. And again, this isn't a hard and fast. We have a couple of friends in our life that, with the kids, and we know everybody and that's good. But it's just minimizing the chance for your kid to experience anything like that, is really it. I wish I had the concrete thing to tell you, hey, train them in this or do this, and that's it. But I've seen too many variables. It's really an overriding principle of communication with your children and letting them know that you're there and letting them know. I think the biggest thing too is giving them opportunities to tell you something that's really uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable conversations, and letting them know that they're not going to be attacked or slammed, or no matter what you listen. And if you're very religious, if you're anything, I understand all of that. And there's times for that, but realize it's a marathon with a kid. Mm-hmm. If they're telling you something and you want them to continue to communicate with you, you cannot just shut them down right away. Right. You got to let them get out there. And it's just a strategic way of communication. And it's tough. I had to listen to some stuff that was really uncomfortable, and, behavior that he wasn't participating in, but it was around him. Mm-hmm. And, and I wanted to go into the full lecture mode, and I didn't. I let him talk and do it, and then gave him feedback. Like I said, it's so strange for somebody like me. I mean, because people look at me and think, okay, I've got all the training in the world. I've done it everywhere. I've done it in the most dangerous parts of the world. You'd think I'd have this, really great plan. And really all it is I'm giving my kids lots of opportunities to participate in very good outlets, where they can go to, a camp experience where they're going to experience something, and do little things on their own. I'm going to give them martial arts experience. It's going to teach them discipline. We also athletically, we teach them stuff. And then we also make sure that just in school that we're always, communicating with them and helping them out. And, it's really it's just because my whole thing is if you're not that source, and I get it, I know how busy life can get, but if you're not that source, they will find a mentor.
Right.
And you may not like the mentor they find.
Right. It sounds like some of the bravest things that we can do as parents is to ask questions and then be bold enough to listen to what comes back.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a skill set you should really work on, do with little things first, because I guarantee you, I have no illusions with my daughters. When they get older, I'm going to have some bombshells I'm going to have to deal with, I'm sure, and I'm steeling myself for that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But very cool. They know if they know they love you, if they know, you're loved, and they know that you care about them, and that, it's not that you don't correct behavior or anything like that, but you can't shut them down when they're trying to tell you about something. Because most of the time when they come to you like that, they're looking for clarity. They don't understand what the term was, or they don't understand what the thing was. And you have this huge opportunity to put it in the right perspective for them, give them your perspective. So it's actually a great opportunity. It'll be uncomfortable though. It'd be much easier. It's much easier for us to go out and smash somebody in the face and protect them from somebody than have that really uncomfortable conversation about drugs or sex or just alcohol or just really malevolent, bad behavior by other people. It's much easier for us to do things that are just really easy to do, which, a physical act is much easier than having to actually sit there and listen.
Right. Man, Tim, I have really enjoyed our time together today. I know after hearing all of this, people are going to want to know more about you. Where can they find you online?
The best place really to get great free information. Also, I interview a lot of subject matter experts is on my YouTube channel. It's just the Tim Larkin YouTube channel, easy to find. And that's a great place for you to go. You can, if you're interested and you like more information, in the YouTube channel, they'll send you towards a free masterclass where you can get, kind of a little bit of what we talked about today, but more in depth that's there. So I would say my YouTube channel, and please subscribe. That'd be helpful.
Sure, man. Tim, I appreciate your time, buddy.
Thank you so much.